Welcome back to Morbidly Bewitched. In the last video, I took you on a trip to Egypt to explain to you how the ancient Egyptians carried out their funerary practices on their deceased, and that it is nothing like what way we care for our deceased over here in the 21st century, but didn't give you anything to compare it to, and that's exactly what I'm going to do in this video. Stay tuned. Now, before I start, I want to just introduce you to my lovely new piece of wall art. Yes, my black violin. So whenever maybe I get a little bit better at it, I'll play you a little tune. Won't that be a treat? Funerals, death, preparation, how we care for our deceased is everything that goes on behind the scenes of a funeral home, an undertaker. The word itself literally stemming from the meaning to undertake a task, because nobody else really wanted to do it, so you called the undertaker. Obviously, the normal procedures are carried out, the protocols that are required for the uplifting of a deceased when someone passes away, whether that be at home, nursing home, hospital. There's standard procedures in place there for the retrieval of that deceased, which change slightly in terms of administration across the world. But the embalming practices here, I'm going to be talking about Northern Ireland and the UK in general, is for three main reasons. And these three main reasons only would be sanitization, preservation, and presentation. With our standard rituals being that someone is placed into a vessel, a coffin, and laid out in a restful repose for family members and loved ones to come along and pay their last respects. That's why embalming has become such a desired procedure, because of the results achieved from the embalming process. Whenever you say the word embalming and you roughly describe it to somebody, they might think of something quite unusual.
Right. I was throwing a big game. I really thought we needed that other airplane. But now I realized that American plane.
I'm going to talk you through it. I'm going to talk you through the three main reasons why we carry this procedure out. Now, unlike the Egyptians, we do not carry out our hygienic preparation because we believe that the body must be intact and displayed for the gods to accept into the afterworld, which means we don't do some of the more severe things that the ancient Egyptians did, like removing the organs and putting them into separate jars, removing the brain through the nostrils. No. All of our organs are kept intact. In fact, it's extremely important that all of the organs are kept intact and the circulatory system remains that way for us to carry out our preservation. This being the first of the three topics I'm going to discuss. Again, back to the Egyptians. What they would have done, like I explained in my previous video, was basically removed everything, dried everything out, so that that body could last for as long as possible. What we do is use the circulatory system to inject an arterial fluid that will preserve the body and the tissue. For this to be achieved, then everything inside that person must be intact so that the fluid can make its way on its little journey across the network, which is vast, throughout the entire system, through all the tiny wee capillaries, into every single piece of tissue and every organ. This arterial solution is mainly based on formaldehyde, and if you want to skip back a couple of episodes, I go into detail explaining just what formaldehyde is. But in this video, we're sticking to the process. So just to give you an extremely basic 101 on biology, your body, your circulatory system is made up of arteries and veins. And they're all connected to, eventually, the heart being the main pump for your entire body. The arteries carry blood away from the heart, so they push the blood to all your extremities, your fingers, your head, your toes, which means they have to be sturdier, thicker to deal with this pressure. The veins, on the other hand, carry the blood back to the heart so that it's reoxygenated, ready to be pumped back by the arteries into the system again. And because of that, veins don't have to be just as sturdy. So a small incision is made to locate one of the major vessels, an artery, so that the formaldehyde can be injected into the circulatory system. This is usually an incision made either in at the neck, in below the arm, or in at the groin. Once the artery has been located, then the formaldehyde and a mixture of all different types of chemicals, which is acting as humectants to keep your skin moisturized, dyes so that you look a nicer color of pink, are then pumped into the system using this injection site. This is carried over in a very slow process so that it saturates every single tissue. And you can see the difference in the body as the treatment is carried out, because the limbs, the fingers, the ears, the face, everything starts to go a lovely flush colour. And again, because the formaldehyde's in there, what this is actually doing is fixating the tissue, which means your pathogens, your bacteria, your viruses, all of those nasty little bugs can't move. It essentially freeze frames them temporarily. Because these little molecules cannot move about freely, that leaves the body in a more rigid but stable condition, and also means that it's hygienic, which moves me on to sanitization. So after the arterial fluid has been successfully injected, all other vectors can be removed from the body. That is, places where bacteria can harbour. Every major artery has a little partner in crime, and that would be an accompanying vein. This vein that runs alongside the artery that was incised for the injection site is normally the one then that's chosen to drain the blood. Then a very small incision is made in the abdomen, and an instrument called a trocar is used to remove gases and all of the other fluids. So it's basically a tool that is attached to another pump that essentially sucks out all of the waste product. The same small puncture is then used with the same instrument but in reverse to put cavity fluid in its place, which means that you're going to be less likely for things like bacteria to harbour and incubate. Cavity fluid is essentially a slightly more concentrated version of arterial fluid, so that you can stave off the problem areas, because the first place that anybody is going to start to decompose is the abdomen due to the intestines and the fecal matter. Realistically, the entire embalming procedure is carried out with two small incisions. The one at the site for the injection point, and the small puncture in the lower quadrant of the abdomen. And once all is said and done, these two small incisions are then stitched up nice and neatly. So once you are left with these lovely results, that then moves me on to the bit that the family mainly notice, because nobody really knows, unless you're in the industry, the process of embalming and what all it entails. That moves us on to presentation. Without a doubt, the most important finishing touches are then carried out on the deceased. So we've got this gorgeous clean canvas to start with. We've done all of our preparation work. The body is now safely, hygienically prepared. But that's not the part that the family is going to notice. What they are going to notice is these subtle changes that we have professionally put in place that make that person look lovely without them realizing what has been done behind the scenes. So these aren't massive, obvious changes. They are just, in general, a far better result for the overall appearance of the deceased. Now, the face is obviously what everybody is identified by. Your mouth, your eyes, the expression. And this is all something that a well-experienced, well-trained, versed embalmer should be aware of. I myself am very conscious of the mouth, because the mouth, if it's not sitting correctly, will completely change that person's facial features for the family. So the most restful position for the mouth and the lips is an absolute must. So when it comes to the facial features, there is a few procedures that's carried out, and they're not too scary, but sometimes misinterpreted. So the eyes have received pressure back into them because of the embalming fluid, which means they're nice and round and full. But the eyes do not keep good retention of fluid. So small half moon cups are put just over, if you want to think of them like contact lenses but thicker, so that you retain that nice rounded shape to the eye. A very small amount of a sticky paste or glue is then used between the eyelid and the wee half moon cup so that the lids stay closed. If that wasn't put in place there to keep the two attached, the eyes would eventually open, and this is just a natural process. It's because of dehydration. The mouth is closed, but not how people normally describe it. I mean, they say about the mouth being stitched and glued and all sorts of horror stories, but you're not going to end up like this. Suture is used to keep the jaw closed, but it's not the actual lips, it's not the mouth that's stitched closed. It's suture that's hid behind sinew and connective tissue to go in at the back of the mouth and up through and in at the back of the nose, which is completely undetectable. You can't see it from looking at the deceased. So it's not just as scary as everybody kind of makes it out to be, but it's essential because some really old school nursing homes still do it. The old Ebenezer Scrooge look, which I'm not a fan of, but I get their point. Believe it or not, it is actually possible to slightly change the features during the embalming process. Because the formaldehyde is a fixing agent, the best way I could describe it is to make sure something is in a suitable array before you put the bun in the oven. So you can actually create, if you want, a slight smile or a contented appearance. So if someone has passed away and say they've been frowning for very, very long time, they've been frowning, whenever you're embalming them, you can actually smooth out with the hands using kind of like a facial massage while the fluid's going in, which will smooth out these lines of stress that the person was going through in their last days, which gives the entire face a more relaxed appearance. So you can in turn then do this with the mouth. You can make it more relaxed. You can smooth out these frown lines that people have developed over the years, because if you do that while the formaldehyde's going into the system, it's going to fix that in place and just make that person look far more peaceful and at rest. The entire body is then washed down in a lovely shower with normal shower gels and shampoos and conditioners, and then dried off, ready for dressing. The clothes is normally supplied by the family, and this can be anything from wedding attire right through to nice comfy pajamas, and that is all personal preference. Men's facial hair is removed, and the ladies, and hair can even be dyed. Things are sent in that maybe the family wish, like say you've got someone there and they like to have a wee purple spray in their hair, that can be put in. They can make their requests at this stage for hairstyles, facial hair, makeup, very important. And usually send in their own because they had their favorite lipstick, or the gentleman had their favorite aftershave. So all of these processes are carried out at the end and just give those gorgeous final touches to the deceased. The body is then placed inside the chosen coffin, laid out, presented very well with the drapery and everything else. And again, more items can be put into that coffin depending on the restrictions of the committal choice, ready for their final destination, which is either going to be the family home or the funeral home for viewing. Or in some cases, no viewing. Some people decide to have a closed coffin. It's all extremely personal. Our standard funeral time here in Northern Ireland would be about 3 to 4 days, and the embalming procedures that's put in place for this is more than enough to last for that length of time. If it's going to be a more advanced level of embalming, a more extended period of time for the funeral, then that's not a problem either. As long as we know in advance, then we will take longer with the embalming procedure, put the fluid in slower at slightly lower pressure. That can be achieved as well, as funerals these days do seem to be getting longer. So as you can see, our embalming practices bears no resemblance to that of the ancient Egyptians in more ways than one. If you do have any concerns or queries about embalming in general, just pop it into the comments section below and I will get back to you on that, because it's not something anybody really talks about. It's not something that you're going to know unless you are in the industry, and I am more than happy to help answer any of your concerns. So with that, join me in my next video when I'm going to be discussing some of the best examples of masters in the embalming field, with one young lady that is still very well observed today and looks like she just died a week ago in Italy. Please subscribe and I'll see you soon.